GeoPaul here. Well, we are still in Yorkshire. We have got a pretty cool thing. Now, we've had to come out a little bit later in the evening. Here in Ripon at 9 PM every night, and I mean every night, one of 4 hornblowers comes out and blows his horn on all 4 corners of this obelisk. And it's a virtual cache, so we have got to get information on this to find out.
Hi!
Where's everyone coming from? So it's quite exciting to see this, really, because they've been doing this at 9 PM every night, I believe, every night, since 886 AD. And they do it to set their watch, or set the clock, or set the time for the town. So guys, why has the Morris dancers turned up?
Because of the Hornblower.
For your entertainment?
Have you got any idea?
No, I don't really know what's going on. Do you know what's going on?
No.
When do you normally?
I never really know what's much going on.
Corner everyone waits for it. Now, my name is Richard. I'm one of the city hornblowers here today. There's 4 of us in total. We share the night between us. What you've seen just there is a ceremony, get the word out, called setting the watch. It's been done in Ripon for a very long time, since 886. That'll make it 1,132 years old. We've kept it going every night. Possibly makes it the longest nightly tradition in Europe, maybe even the world. So it's something we're quite fiercely proud of. Now, the ceremony started, as you've already heard, in 886 from King Alfred. Now, these were Saxon times, obviously, King Alfred, the great Saxon king. But we're also Viking times. And at the time, this whole area was covered with Vikings. King Alfred had managed to push the Vikings out of London, but they'd settled on a bit of an uneasy peace. The Vikings would keep lands in the north, known as the Danelaw territories, and in return they'd leave the south alone, which was a pretty good deal for the King of Wessex. Now, there was a small Saxon settlement inside the now Viking borders of the Danelaw called in Ripon. Now, altogether, that's called today Ripon. Yeah. Doesn't take a genius, this history like. Helps me out a lot. Now, King Alfred came to the small Saxon settlement, and we're not exactly sure why, but decided to grant the city a charter as a sign of good faith. Some thought is that we're a small Saxon settlement about 20 odd miles away from Jorvik, or York, which was the Vikings' main town. Possibly we could keep an eye and send word south on what they're up to. Other thought is that it's just a sign of good faith because we're Saxon, we've done well to keep ourselves Saxon. Good show. But either way, being a time of war, he supposedly didn't have any paper on him at the time, so he gave us a bit of old dead cow. Yeah. Now, you already heard it was one of these, a signal horn or a blowing horn. Not this one, but similar. Now, he'd given us a horn, but what do you do with a horn? If someone gave you a horn, what were you to do with it? Blow it. We decided to put it to a bit better use. We gave it to a wakeman, whose job was to stay awake during the hours of darkness. Wake man. And he would use the horn, sound the horn at the 4 corners of the city to let people know he was on his rounds, so they could go and sleep safe in their beds, and then he'd patrol the city at dark, keeping an eye out for Vikings. If he saw any, a few sharp blasts would wake people up. They'd grab torches, pitchforks, swords, etc. and go and fight the Vikings off. Sort of like an early warning system. And it worked pretty well. We're still here. Over the years, the wakeman slowly evolved in the job. He was awake during the hours of darkness anyway. It made sense that he'd also keep an eye out for people burgling, mugging, the bad sort. See a few of you tonight. So he turned into a form of early police as well. And as the years went by, his job evolved and he became more and more powerful. Started being able to make up laws for himself. started to be able to dish out punishments, whippings and hangings in the market square, which were just on the other side of those buildings back then. Not the most pleasant. We had a visit from a second monarch, King James I. It's King James VI if anyone's from Scotland. Right? I do translate that one. Now he decided that the wakemen had grown all too powerful. He wasn't happy with it. They were doing too much. So he gave us a second charter, but he said to get the charter, you've got to sort yourselves out. Get rid of this wakeman lark. You're going to put in a real mayor, heading a proper council that is elected by the people of Ripon. So that's what we did. You don't argue with King James I. Guy Fawkes found out that a few years later. So we had a mayor put in. To make things a little bit easier, we kept the last wakeman as the first mayor. That man was a man named Hugh Ripley, and he lived supposedly in the house on the corner there with the 4 bay windows and the pointy roof. That's called Wakeman's House. All the locals know it as Wakeman's House. It's now the Wakeman's House Cafe. Although if you're from Ripon Civic Society, they put the green plaque on the Halifax. We'll leave it at that. Now Mr. Ripley, being a previous wakeman, liked the tradition of setting the watch, which was at that point now a ceremonial thing, and he wanted to see it continue. But you also know it's not the nicest job sometimes. Sometimes it's rainy, sometimes it's cold, sometimes you get geocachers coming to pest you. We know the crowd. So instead of doing it himself, he employed someone to do it for him. He employed a hornblower, and that's why we are now a hornblower. The wakeman turned into the mayor and employed a hornblower to do the job for him and getting caught. Now Mr. Ripley didn't trust his first hornblower. Some say he spent too long in the pub. Some say that's still the case. Because the mayor of the day still doesn't trust us. They never do. He added a second part of the tradition. Following the setting of the watch on the market square, the hornblower shall report to the mayor's abode of the evening, giving them a little bit of flexibility where they wanted to sleep. Sound the horn 3 times, doff their cap and repeat the words, "Mr. Mayor, the watch is set." Like I say, this mayor still doesn't trust us. That's still done to this day. So after this, I'm off to the mayor's house about a mile that way, stand beneath the mayoral lamppost which bears the city crest and the city motto as well, and I'll be doing my duty there, sounding the horn. I'll say this, her dogs love it. They love it. The neighbours love it more. The original horn, given to us in 886 by King Alfred the Great, known as the charter horn, is far too fragile. It does still exist. It's in the town hall, covered in black velvet, capped with silver. It's far too fragile to be blown. However, it is still carried on some days for civic processions, and on Yorkshire Day it was, I believe, just in the cathedral. It wasn't carried down there, but it was on display in the cathedral for the civic service in the cathedral on Yorkshire Day. Now that did us fairly well. It did us just over 800 years, I think it was. That was replaced in 1690 by the only horn that Ripon ever bought. Now we know it's the only horn that Ripon ever bought because they made a right fuss of it in the town book. The actual language, I believe I'm right in saying, is the thieves, rogues and vagabonds did charge the Fair Corporation of Ripon the princely sum of 6 shillings and 8pence for a blowing horn. Now 6 shillings and 8pence for some of the younger ones, about 34p in today's money. Do you reckon you could get one of these for 34p? No, barely get a Mars bar for that now. But they were outraged. They were absolutely outraged at this. Some people say you can still hear the cries of how much come from the town hall. That might just be what they're crying about with the latest bills, whatever, I don't know. We got a 4th horn in 1986 to celebrate 1,100 years of the ceremony. That one is given to us by Sigma Antiques just down the hill, made by local craftsmen with copper fittings. It's quite nice. Interestingly, Wayne, who uses that horn, was born in 1986 and likes to tell us it was made for him. We disagree. There is a fifth horn though. Can't be blown in the traditional sense and is visible at all times, and if you're a geocacher, this is probably the moment you've been waiting for. It's 93 feet above our head, right at the top of the obelisk. That is, if you're a geocacher, that's the virtual cache that geocachers are all here to see. That is a weather vane, and it's also a time capsule. It was sealed in 1886. No. 1889, sorry, with 7 gold sovereigns inside, to be brought down 100 years later. Now, if your maths is as good as mine, that's 1989. But, being the old girl she is, the obelisk, not her, the obelisk has needed some repairs over the years. Now, 1986 was one of those years. Now, they had the scaffolding up. Some think it was because they didn't want to pay for the scaffolding 3 years later. Some think it was because it was the 1,100 year celebration. They wanted to bring the horn down early. I think the scaffolding did. So they brought it down early and took it into the town hall and opened it up with great trepidation, wringing their hands, going, 7 gold sovereigns, how much that's worth now? Yay. You can buy a new horn with that. Some think it was bad luck bringing it down early, and I agree. They didn't find 7 gold sovereigns inside. Anyone has a guess?
Nothing.
No. There was something in there. Similar, but in fact worse. It was a you owe us, I like to call it. A bill for the last time it was cleaned. Unpaid.
Oh God.
And a little note that said something along the lines of, there were never any sovereigns, you've all been had, I'm off to the pub. We did seal it back up. We put some interesting things in there this time. We put some council documents, local papers of the day, some bit more information, local history, and a set of Maundy money the Queen had given us the year before in 1985. And put it back up for another 100 years. Whether any of that's still there in 100 years' time remains to be seen. Anyone interested, to stick to tradition, we did add a bill for the cleaning as well, although I'm told it was paid before it went up there. Now, one last thing before I go, you may have noticed that I turned and bowed to the house on the corner as I finished. Now, this is a bit of a superstition, long held by us horn-blowing folk. Mr. Ripley, the last Wakeman first mayor, likes the horn-blowing ceremony and likes to make sure it's done right. Now, the superstition is that should the horn not be blown to his satisfaction on any given night, his ghostly face will appear at the top attic window, and a plague shall befall the city, specifically bad things to the hornblower. I've not seen him myself, thankfully, but we have had dealings with him in the past. On the 3rd of January 2011, icy cold night, the hornblower of the day came out. I think it was the deputy on that night. He came out. I'll say this, these things do not like the cold. You got horn, which is made from horn, likes the cold about as much as the cows do, don't like it. And then a metal mouthpiece, which gets very, very, very cold indeed. Now, the first note that came out was actually reasonable, and the hornblower was pretty happy with that. I think Jim was on that night, actually. He was pretty happy. The second corner, disaster struck, and the metal mouthpiece froze to his lips. He could not get a note out at all. He managed to warm it up, pull it away, came to the 3rd and 4th corners. Now, he swears on his life that as he bowed, he saw the ghostly face at the top attic window. Now, we'll never fully know if he was telling the truth, if he saw the ghostly face, or if he just spent a bit too long in the unicorn before he came out. But what we do know is that at 9 on the 3rd of January 2011, pretty much just about when you finish blowing, Ripon was struck by an earthquake measuring 3.6 on the Richter scale. Yeah, a few shocked faces there. So I'm not going to take my chances with Mr. Ripley. I'm going to do what I can to make him happy. But from me just now, if you'd like to get off, sleep safe, good night, and the watch is